Welcome to our second lesson on the topic of fractions, decimals and percentages. Today we're going to be looking at percentages of amounts, and this is a level 1 lesson. So if you felt like the level 1 lesson was a bit too easy last time, you might want to try the level 2 lesson. If not, we'll carry on from here. So before you start, you will need the equipment listed in the box as normal, and you will need to write down the title, underlining it, followed by a subheading of Do Now with the question numbers 1 to 5 like I've done in the top right hand corner. Pause the screen now so you can make sure you have that down. Lovely. So as always, we'll start with a 5-a-day starter. 5 questions are on this slide. Give yourself no more than 4 minutes on this. Okay, make sure you write down the question and your answers and pause the screen now so you can do that. Great. Right, now we're going to mark them. So black pens up, drop them, pick up your green pens. Okay, answers are coming up now. If you need to pause it because you need a little bit extra time, pause it now before I put the answers up. The answers are now up. Give yourself a little bit of time to mark those or correct ones if you're not quite right. Okay, don't forget, just on question 2, the vocabulary, quad means 4, just like quad bike has 4 wheels, or the quadriceps muscle is a group of 4 muscles. Quadrilateral is a shape with 4 sides. Okay, so today we're going to be calculating percentages of amounts. So a little bit of retrieval practice to start with. I'm going to go through the 3 examples that are on the slide there. Okay, if you need to make any notes or copy my examples, pause the video at the end and then copy them down before moving on. So your retrieval practice are all examples of dividing by 10. So if I take the first example, 300 divided by 10, okay, when we divide by 10, it means we're going to decrease our number by a factor of 10. So what happens is my numbers move back a place value column. So my 300s becomes 3 tens. My 0 tens become 0 units. My decimal point, remember, always stays in the same place. And I can move my 0 units back to 0 tenths. So my answer to 300 divided by 10 is 30. And if you think about that, if you go backwards, well, 30 times by 10 gives you 300. So just double check your answers. If we look at this one, we've got 620 divided by 10 again. So if there was my decimal point, my 600 now becomes 6 tens. My 2 tens becomes 2 units. And my 0 units moves into the tenths column. Okay, so my answer to 620 divided by 10 is 62. Okay, that means there are 62 tens in 620. So last example, we've got 7 divided by 10 this time. So if I just draw on my decimal point like before, my 7 units need to decrease by a factor of 10. So my 7 units now become 7 tenths. Okay, and I just pop a 0 in my units column. So my answer to 7 divided by 10 is 0.7. Okay, pause the screen now if you would like to make a note of any of those methods. And now it's your turn to do some retrieval practice. So you need to write a subheading of retrieval practice and underline it with the question numbers 1 to 5, just like I've done here. pause the screen now to allow you some time to do that. Okay, let's go for our first question then. So first question is 190 divided by 10. 190 divided by 10. I'll give you 10 seconds to complete these. 5, 3, 2, 1. Okay, black pen's down, green pen's up. The answer to that one is 19. Well done if you got that. So question number 2, we have got 63 divided by 10. Again in black pen, 63 divided by 10. I'll give you 10 seconds for this one. 5, 3, 2, 1. Black pen's down, green pen's up. The answer to this one is 6.3. 6.3. Question number 3. Again, black pens. 37 divided by 10. We've got 37 divided by 10. 10 seconds on this one. 5, 3, 2, 1. Black pens down and pick up your green pens. Answer for this one is 3.7. 3.7. Okay, question number 4. Black pens again. 278 divided by 10. 278 divided by 10. 10 seconds on this one. 5, 3, 2, 1. Black pen's down, green pen's up. Answer for this one is 27.8. 27.8. Okay, and the last question, question number 5. So black pens for this last one. 122.8 divided by 10. Don't forget to move all your numbers back one place value column. So we've got 122 divided by 8. 122.8 divided by 10. And 5 more seconds on that one. 3, 2, 1. Black pens up and green pens in your hand for an answer of 12.28. 12.28. Okay. Give yourself a retrieval practice score out of 5. Add up your scores. Okay, well done. If you got 4 or 5, excellent work. Okay. If you got 3, well done. If you got 1 or 2, you might just want to go back and have another look at my examples. Okay, you can rewind the video if you need to. Okay, so we're going to start by finding some percentages of amounts now. So a really key bit of information is on the screen now. To find 10%, you need to divide by 10. You need to copy that down onto your bit of paper or into your exercise book now. So pause the screen for a couple of seconds so you can do this. Great, well done. So now you've got the key bit of information. I'm going to work through 3 examples of finding 10% before you have a go. So our first example is find 10% of 20. Now the key bit of information you just wrote down was to find 10%, we have to divide our number by 10. So 20 divided by 10. I'm going to follow the same steps as I did previously. So if I just draw in my decimal point, I'm going to change my 2/10 down to 2 units. My 0 units becomes 0/10, and my answer to finding 10% of 20 is 2. Now it's an amount I have found. It's not a percentage, so I don't need a percentage sign here. Okay, my answer is just 2. So for the second example, 3. So again, to find 10%, we have to divide by 10. Now that's because 100% is a whole. 10%, there are 10% in 100. So I have to divide by 10 to find one of those 10%. So 3 divided by 10. Again, pop on your decimal point. If I divide by 10, my 3 decreases from 3 units down to 3/10, and I just put a 0 in front of my decimal point. Okay, so my answer to finding 10% of 3 is 0.3. Okay, last example, 86. So if I want to find 10% of 86, again, I divide by 10. So there's my decimal point. 86 divided by 10. My 8/10s becomes 8 units. My decimal point is still in the same place. And my 6 units becomes 6/10. Okay, so my answer to 10% of 86 is 8.6. Okay, pause the video now if you'd like to copy any of those examples down. And it's now your turn. So there are 3 questions on the board for you to find 10% of 30, 10% of 7, and 10% of 65. So black pens in your hands again. Give yourself about 3 minutes to work on those questions by pressing the pause button now. Okay, I'm going to put the answers up in a minute. Hopefully you've paused it and aren't just skipping on to the answers and copying them down. If that is you, make sure you are pausing now and trying to answer them questions. Okay, answers in your green pen to mark are 3, 0.7 and 6.5. Mark those in green pen or just correct them where you need to. Brilliant, well done. So we're going to move on to some harder examples now before you do your applied practice. So I'm going to go through the 3 examples that are on the screen now. The first one is finding 10% of 170. So again, we're still finding 10%. So using your key bit of information, we have to divide our number by 10. So 170 divided by 10. If I put my decimal point in there, my 100 decreases by a factor of 10 to 1/10. My 7/10s decrease down to 7 units. My decimal point stays in the same place, and my 0 moves from 0 units to 0/10. So my answer to find 10% of 170 is 17. Don't forget, it's an amount, it's not a percentage, so I don't need that percentage sign. It's just 17. My next answer, 658. So I need to find 10% of 658. Same process. I divide by 10. My decimal point is here. So my 600s go down to 6/10s. My 5/10s go down to 5 units. And my 8 units decrease by a factor of 10 down to 8/10. So my answer to finding 10% of 658 is 65.8. My last example, okay, is 1,209, and again I'm finding 10%. So I need to use my key bit of information. To find 10%, I divide by 10. My decimal point is here. So my 1,000 decreases to 100. My 200s become 2 tens. My 0 tens become 0 units. And my 9 units decrease down to 9 tenths. So my answer to 10% of 1,209 is 120.9. Pause the video there if you'd like to copy any of those worked examples down to help you with future questions. And again, it's now your turn. So you've got 3 harder questions here to have a go at. You're finding 10% of 130, 10% of 241, and 10% of 3,056. Pause the video now and give yourselves 3 minutes to answer these questions again. Brilliant, well done. So I'm going to put the answers up in 3, 2, 1. We need to get our black pens up and our green pens in our hands. Answers are there to mark and give yourself a score out of 3. Excellent. Okay, so now is your applied practice. Okay, you've got 4 questions in the red box, 4 in the orange box, and 4 in the green box. Okay, so work through those questions. Pause the video in a second when I tell you to, and give yourself no more than 4 minutes to work through these. If you complete all those, well done. Move on to the extension, but you're working out 10% of all these numbers. Pause the video now and 4 minutes to work through these. Okay, make sure you have given yourself enough time, 4 minutes to work through these. I'm going to put the answers up in about 5 seconds. So if you do need to pause the video, do so now. Answers are on the screen for you now. So green pens in your hand to mark these ones. And once you have marked these, give yourself a score out of 12. Pause now to give you enough time to mark them. Excellent effort, well done. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our next level of challenge. So this time we're going to be working out 5% of an amount. So the key bit of information here is to find 5%, work out 10% first, and then half it. Pause the video now and write down that key message. Okay, well done. So I'm going to go through 4 worked examples of finding 5%. Our first one is to find 5% of 20. So my key bit of information said find 10% first, which was dividing by 10. So 20 divided by 10 gives me an answer of 2. And then what I need to do is half my answer. So 5% of 20, well, half of 2 is 1. Okay, next example, 68. I'm going to follow the same steps. my first step is to divide by 10 because this gives me 10%. So 68 divided by 10 equals 6.8. Then what I need to do is half this number, because if this is 10%, if I half it, it gives me what I want. It gives me 5%. So half of 6.8 gives me 3.4. So 5% of 68 is 3.4. Next example is to find 5% of 4. So again, first step, divide by 10. 4 divided by 10 equals 0.4. Then I'm going to half this number. So 5% equals 0.2. Last example. So this time I want 5% of 40. So I divide by 10 to find 10%. 40 divided by 10 gives me 4. And then half of 4 gives me my 5%, which is 2. Again, pause the video now if you'd like to copy down any of those examples with my steps next to it. And again, now it's your turn to find 5%, this time of 80, 44, 9, and 170. Pause the video now and spend 3 minutes working on those questions. Great. So black pens up, drop them, green pens in your hands, ready for the answers. There they are. Spend 10 seconds now just marking or correcting your work. And now we're going to move on to finding 20%. So we've done 10%, we've done 5%. Now we are finding 20% of a number. So our key bit of information is to find 20%, we first need to work out our 10% and then we double our answer. So pause the video now and give yourself a bit of time to write down that key message. Well done. Okay, so again, I'm going to work through 4 worked examples. So my first one is find 20% of 30. So my key message said find 10% and then double it. So to find 10%, remember we divide by 10. So 30 divided by 10 is 3. And then what I need to do is double my answer. So double 3 means that 20% of 30 is 6. My next example, 23. So I first find 10% by dividing by 10. 23 divided by 10 equals 2.3. Then what I need to do is double this answer. Okay, and I get that 20% equals 4.6. Okay, third example, 5. So first step, divide by 10 to find 10%. So 5 divided by 10 is 0.5. So 0.5 doubled gives me an answer of 20% equaling 1. Don't forget, we double this answer. We don't go back to the start and double this one. Okay, we divide by 10 to find 10%, and then we double our answer. Last example, 120. First step, divide by 10 to find 10%. 120 divided by 10 gives me 12. And then I need to double this answer. Double 12 means that 20% of 120 is 24. Okay, again, pause the video here if you need to copy down any of these examples of finding 20%. Brilliant. So moving on, it's now your turn. You've got 4 questions again. So give yourself 3 minutes and pause the video now to do this. Right, answers are coming up. So black pens dropped, green pens in your hand. Answers are on the board. So we've got 14, 8.2, 1.8 and 60.4 for our 20%. Okay, after you've marked them, we're now going to do our applied practice on finding 5% and finding 20%. So you've got 5 questions on each. Back in your black pens, okay, if you complete those 10 questions, there's an extension question at the bottom of finding 30%. Think about how you might do that. So pause the video now and give yourself about 6 minutes to work through these questions. I hope you're pausing this video to answer these questions. If you're not, make sure you have done so. Answers are now coming up in 3, 2, 1. So green pens in your hand for the answers that have come up on the slide now. Pause to give you time to mark and correct. Brilliant. Okay, so here's your exit ticket. Today we've learned how to find out 10%, 5% and 20% of a number. So what you need to do is copy down this table and fill in the blank spaces for finding 10%, 5% and 20% of 6, 12, 45 and 150. Pause now so you can complete that task. Really well done today, guys. Okay, so you should now know how to find 10%, 5% and 20% of different numbers. What you need to do is log on to the Google form and complete the 4 questions underneath this video lesson. Okay, but really good work. Okay, lots of resilience through those maths questions. And I look forward to seeing you for the next lesson.